Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and we are on the precipice of 2025 NFL free agency. However, on Friday, we got a bombshell report by Mike Silver and Tim Kawakami of The Athletic and the SF Standard detailing the power struggle inside 49ers HQ. We're going to talk about Jed York's taking back of control. Going to get into, does this make Kyle Shanahan's seat hot or even maybe warm in the upcoming season, and how does the power struggle inside San Francisco impact free agency and the future of Brock Purdy? All that coming up next right here on 49ers Access. All right, folks, we have learned via, again, Mike Silver of The Athletic that San Francisco is, quote-unquote, having an organizational reset in the building headed into the NFL Draft and the 2025 NFL free agency period. A lot of details, going to go through most of the big things here, talk about what led up to the reset and the impacts of the domino effect that has become the reset this offseason. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let's dive into the power struggle happening inside the San Francisco 49ers headquarters out there in Santa Clara, California. A lot of this stems from the Niners' all-in mentality. A lot of this stems from the Niners trying to get a Super Bowl, trying to be competitive, go out there, win a Super Bowl, buy players, trade for players, spend big-time money. And when you do that year after year after year, and in the Niners' case, while you've been really successful, been to 2 Super Bowls, multiple NFC Championship games, but when you don't win the big one, at a certain point your boss says, okay, Kyle, okay, John, I get it, we've been all in, but we haven't really been winners, if you will. We haven't gotten the big one, and when you don't get the big one, sometimes you see some restraints placed back onto the financial aspects of the way you're able to spend in free agency in the draft, and San Francisco has now seen that been done to them this offseason. Now, that said, it feels like all of this, I don't want to say resentment, but all of this organizational reset talk stems from the Brandon Ayuk contract situation last year, where while there were so many small domino effects, the Hargrave deal, the Trey Lance trade, the Joey Bosa deal, the Deebo Samuel deal, all of it's come to head following the Brandon Ayuk signing of his extension, 4 years, $120 million last offseason. This article by Mike Silver details that they view Ayuk as an immature, almost childlike figure inside the organization, that they almost have a disdain for how he handled things last year, which I can see why. The podcast, the post, the unwillingness to budge or even make an offer back to them. Just this kind of either trade me or sign me to what I want. I'm not going to, I'm not going to negotiate or bargain with you. Just do what I want or get me out of here kind of idea. And that has obviously pissed off some people inside the room. But when you look at how this affects Kyle Shanahan, I think he is one of the biggest players in this because he's the head coach. He has vouched for Deebo Samuel, re-signing Brandon Ayuk. He's been the one kind of pushing to get these deals done. And I think there is some like, okay, Kyle, we'll give in, but now we've given in so much and you haven't won a Super Bowl, we can't give you what you want anymore. In an odd way, it's kind of like a child, right? Where the child acts up once, okay, you give him some grace, put him on timeout, no big deal. The second time, okay, all right, here's the Brandon Ayuk deal, then bang, 3 strikes and you're out, that being the 6-11 season we saw last year. Kyle, in a way, when it comes to having this emotional connection to players, is on his 3rd strike. Like, he's almost out. This is okay, we gave you what you wanted, it didn't work. Now it's time to do things on our terms. Now it's time to change, reset, as Mike Silver says here, because the quotes here are not damning, but very telling as to how the organization views Kyle. And I quote here, Kyle Shanahan was quote-unquote desperate to re-sign Brandon Ayuk as they viewed him as indispensable. However, Silver reports that Shanahan, Lynch, and Jed York collectively decided to move off of Brandon Ayuk, cut their ties. They said, look, we're not going to win this one. It's worth moving off of. They viewed him as emotionally immature. This was seen when, his tirade, the shorts, the practice pants gate, if you will, after he signed his deal about a month later, or he wore the wrong shorts during practice, got pissed off, and kind of got sent away. There was the podcast, the social media posts, this outward almost like I have leverage when clearly you don't over San Francisco, but Kyle gave in, right? Ayuk comes into the building about a couple days before week 1 against the Jets and goes, okay, Kyle, I'll sign. Kyle races upstairs in what is now seen as kind of a bad look inside the organization, which I get it. Ayuk got injured, and, had he not got injured, maybe that doesn't look as bad, but he got hurt. Team was 6-11, but the Niners really have buyer's remorse, knowing that they wouldn't have had to pay Brandon Ayuk 4 years, $120 million, wouldn't have given in to his contract demands, could have traded him for, let's just say, a second-round pick, because John Lynch was on the phone with the Pittsburgh Steelers narrowing down the details with the trade. So a lot of this reset really stems from the Brandon Ayuk contract, Kyle being emotionally attached to players, Deebo Samuel, who apparently him and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan got on a plane together before he signed his massive 3-year deal. And it's like, they met and the things couldn't get hashed out then. Again, Kyle being emotional, Kyle saying, I need these guys to win. And when you don't win, that's when you have the organization, Prague, Jed York say, well, wait a minute, Kyle. We gave in to you. Now we're taking back some control. And I think that a lot of this, while I do believe power struggle may be too harsh of a term, there undoubtedly is some course correction being had, which I don't know if that means Kyle is losing control. I just think it's they're not going to give in as much. I think when you go to a Super Bowl really early in what was considered a rebuild, year 3 of the rebuild, technically year 2 of the quarterback you traded for and signed Jimmy Garoppolo, and you almost have it done, it speeds up everything for you. And when that process takes place, the ownership, the financial guys in the building, Prague Marate, John Lynch, they're more open to being aggressive, signing their own players, hitting on draft picks, taking big swings, but that can also lead to big misses. And Kyle Shanahan, for all the great he's done, because he has been so emotionally tied to certain players, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. In Kyle's case, can be a pretty bad thing. It has led to some pretty big misses. I don't think it's wrong to say that the Niners regret Deebo's deal, although early on in Ayuk's deal, they hate how things progressed and how that deal eventually got signed. I'm sure they hated the Hargrave deal, hence why he's being released this offseason, and other deals along the way. Western Richburg, I'm sure they didn't like because of the injury he had. But because of their process being sped up, they were more, I guess you can say, allowing, more lenient on Kyle to give him what he wanted, knowing they were so close. Okay, you've gotten your good graces. You've won plenty of football games. We'll give you what you want because we're this close. We're inches away, 3 minutes, 9 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl. If we buy in further to him, maybe it gets us that 6th Lombardi. But that wasn't the case. Things have kind of not crumbled, but certainly are now different. The relationship, although isn't frayed, there is more of this, hands-off approach kind of being pushed on Kyle when it comes to roster decisions, which we know Kyle has been one of the main factors in who they draft, who they sign. He's kind of the final say-so when it comes to roster decisions. I think that's changing. While Kyle is the head coach, he will definitely be involved in those conversations. You can tell there is this, we got this, Kyle. Don't worry. Jed, Parag, Lynch are like, we're not taking sides, but we gave you what you want. It flamed out in a way. Now we have to kind of go and not do damage control, but figure this mess out we currently have with our cap and our cash kind of flowing and coming out of San Francisco. However, a lot of this conversation surrounding the article has become, Kyle Shanahan's going to get fired. Is his seat hot? No and no. According to Mike Silver, Jed York remains highly supportive of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and it says that, as he has been since the day they were hired in 2017. It's really hard to be impatient with a coach or a GM in which you've been the second most successful team since 2019. Now, yes, there's reasons to be upset. There are some blips, some road bumps in the way that can make you say, well, didn't love that, didn't love this. However, this is the most successful San Francisco has been since like 1994. Like, this really has been it, 1995, when they beat the Chargers in the Super Bowl. This is their greatest era since then. You can argue the Harbaugh era too, but that was a really short era. This has been a 5 years of sustained success, and York would be foolish to get rid of this, to let this collapse. Similarly, to how the Harbaugh era did out there in the early 2010s. Now, Silver also says here that despite last season's flame out being 6-11, the injuries, the last place finish, the owner, the head coach, the GM all remain in alignment, as Lynch's comments about reining in cash at last week's scouting combine suggest. So Kyle has bought in. Now, maybe he has to, of threat of losing his job. I don't think that's the case, but I don't think Kyle really had a choice. He could certainly leave, but that would be dumb. I think this is simply York and Lynch and Kyle and Parag saying, look, something has to change, and kind of, not to say tying Shanahan's hands behind his back, saying, look, go with it or you're out of here, but more so along the ways of like, look, we have to, we have to fix what's happening. We have to, you're going to do this. Kyle, you're only going to do this. It's almost like compartmentalizing, if you will, the front office and the head coaching positions, which I think is really important, really smart. And I think when you talk about the bad deals they've handed out, Kyle may be one of the bigger factors in those deals getting done, in which Parag and Jed and Lynch are like, maybe don't love that. Even John Lynch, I think when you talk about, you go back to 2021, right? They trade up for the number 3 overall pick. There was no indication that John Lynch was the leading factor in wanting to make that move, or at least trading up to acquire Trey Lance, right? There was so much smoke around Mac Jones and maybe Justin Fields and Aaron Rodgers at the time. A lot of that, I really think that John would have been comfortable getting Mac Jones, which in retrospect wouldn't have been that great, but that plane ride back from Justin Fields' pro day, that's the time where Kyle kind of made his mind up and drawing up plays for Trey Lance. I don't know if John Lynch was maybe as enthusiastic about that pick as Kyle was, and that came back to bite Kyle. This is not a one deal, oh my God, Kyle, you're terrible. This is a continual domino effect of bad deal, bad deal, bad deal. Here we are. Massive things have to change, which is why I do think the big takeaway from this article shouldn't be, oh, there's a power struggle, shouldn't be, oh my goodness, Jed and Kyle hate each other. This is simply a boss, a CEO, an owner of an organization telling his head coach, his manager, if you will, stay in your lane. I have my job. You have your job. Yes, you have ultimate power. Yes, you can make decisions. Yes, you're going to be involved in these conversations, but you having the final say-so is not going to happen anymore. You need to stay in your lane. You're a phenomenal coach. I want you to be the head coach. And yes, you can be in the scouting process, the interview process. You can operate as a head coach and maybe do more than most head coaches would. But the idea that you're going to have ultimate, complete control over the roster is no longer the case. Yes, you'll be involved, but I need you to stay in your lane at times. And Kyle, I think, with the racing up the stairs for Brandon Ayuk and the Deebo Samuel deal and the Trey Lance trade up and draft pick, I think that was Kyle kind of getting out of his lane as a head coach. But I got to make the right choice. I got to get the guys I need in here that I deem fit, where maybe John and Parag and Jed are like, I don't really think that deal is worth it. So if there is one takeaway, I do think this is Jed York telling Kyle Shanahan, stay in your lane, which aligns with what Mike Silver says in the article. Jed York would prefer Kyle Shanahan focus on doing what he does best, scheming it up and coaching players on the roster, rather than worrying about making sure so many of his highest profile players make bank. It's so funny. We have been told by Kyle himself, I'm not really involved in the contract negotiation process. Clearly, that's not the case. Clearly, he's been lying. Clearly, as dictated by the Brandon Ayuk signing, he was the one that said, John, put the phone down, he'll sign. And Jed and John and Parag are like, yeah, but it's 4 years, $120 million, $30 million per year. We don't want to make that deal. And Kyle's like, get the deal done now. He's coming to us. We can sign it now. We can put this behind us. He's quote-unquote hijacked our offseason, as Silver puts it. We can put this behind us. We have to be all in on this year. Forget the money. We'll figure it out later. And it backfired. This is now Jed telling Kyle, stay in your lane. Be the head coach. Just be the head coach. Silver also talks about in past years, as Kyle has, as York has decided to give out massive signing bonuses to Brock Purdy in previous years, signing Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and Javon Hargrave and Nick Bosa and others along the way. Kittle, Fred Warner, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. Purdy could be one of the biggest victims of this shift happening, this organizational shift happening in San Francisco. He says in previous years, York may have been swayed by his head coach and GM's convictions. This time, I expect the owner and his chief negotiator, executive vice president of football operations, Parag Marathe, to be, and I quote here, as ruthless as they deem appropriate. It's so fun for me to do this show, whether it's the podcast version or the YouTube version. And when you read tea leaves and you put things together and you start to connect dots before these big articles come out, you're reading Kawakami's reports and you're like, something's changing. Although I don't think it is as drastic as people make it believe or make it out to be. We have been saying this for weeks. We have been talking about there being an organizational shift, there being this quote-unquote power struggle, if you will, this being the Niners saying, look, enough's enough. We have to win these deals. I think when you talk about the cash flow, it's not a cap issue. It's a cash issue. That's the problem. You have these billionaires, these millionaires, this organization that makes tons of money a year, just doling out cash to Ayuk and Deebo and Kittle, all these big-name free agents, and after a while, they're saying, I'm giving you $120 million guaranteed. I'm giving you a $50 million signing bonus. And some of these players, frankly, stink. Some of these guys have lasted a quarter of their deals. They signed Javon Hargrave to a 4-year, $84 million deal. He lasted 2 seasons and only played 3 games last year. Deebo Samuel lasted 2 years into a 3-year, $71 million deal. Like, they have been missing and missing and missing despite being aggressive on these deals. And you're having Parag and Jed like, okay, the all-in mindset is starting to backfire, if you will. You saw it last year being uber top-heavy, cost this team a lot. Now, would it have changed the outcome? Maybe they go 8-9 and they miss the playoffs still. But, this is kind of the end of the rope. This is the end of the rope for, I think, Kyle when it comes to being the lead factor in these contract negotiations. Now, that said, a lot has also been made of Parag taking control. Parag being kind of this ruthless, being this like evil empire, Emperor Palpatine style behind the scenes, like, I'm going to make sure Kyle suffers and make sure the roster is decimated and make sure I take over the franchise. I don't think that's the case. There has been no indication that this team is not going to spend money. There has been this, I think, maybe oversaturation of opinions when it comes to San Francisco reverting back to a cheaper franchise, reverting back to an organization that, isn't going to spend big money. I don't think that's the case. The way I read this is that the Niners, Parag, Jed, John, maybe even Kyle Shanahan too, this is almost them telling themselves, Jed and Parag telling Kyle and John, you have to refocus yourselves. No longer can we spend recklessly. We have to be selective. We have to be smart with our spending rather than paying for anybody. 2 years ago, John Lynch openly told the media he does not see them spending big money. 2 weeks later, they're signing Javon Hargrave to a 4-year, $82 million deal. And again, while you're trying to win now, those moves can make some sense for you. However, this is Jed and Parag telling Kyle and John, look, we need you to put your best scouting cap on and really pick out the diamonds in the rough for us. If say you want to get Drew Dahlman, fine. But you better make sure he's the guy. You're not going to get 4 or 5 of those, highly touted free agents. You're going to get some bargain bin guys, and you may get 1 big name each free agency season. You're not going to get 4 or 5 like you used to get the last couple years. This is Parag telling Jed, telling Kyle and John, like, look, you spent recklessly. You've gone out there and you've kind of blown some money, and now your budget's blown, and now you kind of owe the IRS, if you will. You have some credit that you got to pay back. This is now them paying their credit back. This is them now saying, okay, take an off-season off, if you will, 11 draft picks. You have some money. You're going to pay Brock Purdy. You want to get Kittle done. You want to get Warner done, but maybe you don't have enough money for Hufanga, Andre Greenlaw, Aaron Banks, and Charvarius Ward, and other people you may value on the open market. Maybe you want to go out and get Drew Dahlman. Sorry, too bad. Find a B-tier center instead of a A-plus tier center, right? Don't be afraid to maybe realize that, okay, we don't have the budget for that because you spent early on and missed early. Now, this is not a complete wiping of the all-in, I think, mentality. This is a almost pausing of it. This is a course correction to rebooting, or as John Lynch called it, recalibrating how much they spend. I think it's a great thing, too. We talked here on the show plenty of times following the Packers idea, following the Rams blueprint of, look, you can spend and go all in, but inevitably it comes back to bite you. The F them pick strategy will come back to bite you down the road. The New Orleans Saints were all in the entire Drew Brees tenure, and it was a really great tenure. They flourished there. They got a Super Bowl. They were competitive almost every single year. But late in his tenure, they kept kicking that can down the road over and over and over again, paying for big-name free agents, missing on edge rushers to help make that defense more viable. Later in Brees' tenure, they couldn't get the offensive weapons in there. There were so many problems. The last thing San Francisco wants to become is the New Orleans Saints, where you have Brock Purdy on a very expensive contract. You have Brandon Ayuk on a very expensive contract. You're paying a 29-year-old or soon-to-be Christian McCaffrey big money. You're paying Trent Williams, a 37-year-old left tackle who has injury history, big money. But you don't have the insulation. You're missing a number 2 linebacker, a free safety. And you need to have interior defensive tackles and linemen. The last thing they want to become is the New Orleans Saints. And this is them telling John, telling Kyle, look, if you want to get there and be the Saints, that's up to you, but we're not going to let that happen. We are going to, not to say handcuff you, that's a very drastic term to use, but almost like lead you into the opposite direction. Let us be the steers of the ship for an offseason, get us back on track with our spending. That way, next offseason or in 2 offseasons, if you draft correctly, we can get right back into the all-in expenditure, if you will, because this is not Jed and Parag saying we're not going to be all in for the next 5 years. This is them saying if we course correct and do it now, we can get right back to that in a year or 2. And that's what they should be. But that last quote by Silver of them being as ruthless as they deem appropriate, this comes as trading away, I think, Kyle Juszczyk or cutting Kyle Juszczyk, maybe cutting Jake Brendel, cutting Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, almost chipping away at the roster Kyle and John constructed the last few years or so. Trading Brandon Ayuk, maybe. You already traded away Deebo Samuel. This is them chipping away at what Kyle and John built to hopefully, in a way, to use some nature knowledge. They want to graft on another tree. They want to make the tree stronger. The branches have died, if you will, of this all-in 2019 to 2024 kind of era of San Francisco 49er football. Let's cut the tree off while it's dead, graft onto it, and build a new successful branch of the San Francisco 49ers in the future. I think that's what this is. They're not cutting Kyle and John off. This is them trying to graft a new era into what is an already existing successful era to elongate it, if you will. But this then leads us into Brock Purdy. A lot of this has to do with Brock Purdy because the quotes by Mike Silver about 3/4 of the way through the article, I think, are really telling as to what we know now about Brock Purdy's contract negotiations. Because, and I'll read you the quotes here, if you are an owner, being Jed York, and your head coach, being Kyle Shanahan, feels compelled to sprint up the stairs to get you to commit $120 million to a player prone to throwing tantrums over the color of his practice shorts, you hope that coach is built like Andy Reid, or that your GM's office door has a really strong deadbolt. What does that tell you? Jed was furious about the Ayuk deal, Kyle running up there, pausing things. They had, in a way, agreed to trading Ayuk. We're done, cut the ties. And then things shifted in one fell race up the stairs to tell John, pause. The next quote here is also big. Going, quote-unquote, all in is out. Coach-driven emotion is no longer a guiding principle. The Niners are attempting to be cold, calculated, and analytical when it comes to roster decisions. An organizational reset that coincides with the negotiations of a massive contract extension for quarterback Brock Purdy. Cold, calculated, and analytical. Again, it's not a no-spend zone. It's just a be smarter in how you spend zone. They're going to cut some of your fan favorite players. They're going to move off of players that maybe have some left in the tank, but are not worth the contract in which they have signed, or they're going to ask players like Kyle Juszczyk to maybe take a pay cut. I think that's on the table. He could say no, and at that point, well, that's too damn bad, honestly. But that brings us to the Brock Purdy stuff, because I think cold, calculated, ruthless, analytical, when you hear those four words tossed around in the exact same offseason as if you're going to pay your franchise quarterback, that to me makes me believe that all the talk of, oh, it'll be easy, no drama, that's off the table. This is not going to be an easy contract to get done. They are going to be, as we have said many times in the last week or so, they are going to be penny pinching. They are going to fight for every penny, as Mike Silver puts it. Yes, they want to pay Brock Purdy. Yes, they want to get Purdy's contract done. They view him as the franchise. However, a lot of talk of $55 million, $57 million per year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they are going to almost push Purdy's value as far down as he will take it, to maybe his wit's end, to say, look, what's the cheapest deal you'll take? That's the one they want to sign. They want to be, let's say Brock wants 120 guaranteed, 180 guaranteed. Nope, we're only going to give you 130. Last offer. If you don't want that, fine, play out your deal. We're going to franchise tag you. Now, the franchise tag complicates things with the cap and whatnot, but I think they are going to be ruthless, cold, calculated. They are going to be this, they are going to operate somewhat as a middling MLB franchise that, while yes, can spend money, tells them, look, you get one guy, and maybe Brock Purdy's that guy. Maybe their big free agent this year is extending their quarterback. Maybe this is them saying, look, as we've talked here on the show, they want to win these deals. They're done losing. They're tired of losing. They lost on Hargrave, Ayuk, in their own mind, Bosa. They only view Kittle and Warner as the big wins of their extensions, right? They want to win this deal. They view winning as equally as important, if not more important, than signing their franchise quarterback. Is that good? We will see. I don't know if I like that at all, but they view winning as the most important thing for them right now. They view as a financial organization. We have dished out money. It has not worked. And look, I've been there when companies have cut funding, when they've fired people that are paying and getting paid a ton of money, right? I've seen people getting $300,000 a year get cut, and they're worth the ratings. But if they can find people that are 1/8 the price but can give the same exact output, they'll do it. This is San Francisco as an organization operating more as a business rather than a football team trying to win now. I think that has to be understood. And you can still win operating as a business, trying to maybe get a better bang for your buck, but this is kind of being this, fans are like, oh my God, it's over. I don't think so. Now, we did get some reporting late last night, or actually on Friday, but I found it last night. Diana Rossini of The Athletic on the Scoop City podcast said the Niners' initial offer for Brock Purdy was not $45 million per year. She called that false. It did not happen, and she even said that was disrespectful. What does that tell you? That tells me San Francisco's probably living towards more of the $48 to $52 million range. I don't know how high they'll go there, but if they're going to penny pinch, I don't see that deal getting done until August, until July. No longer do I see something happening, now or in April. While both sides may have the desire to get something done, when you start penny pinching, when you start having agents who view this as their Super Bowl, if you will, this is Prague's Empire Strikes Back. He's okay. Kyle, you had the new hope. You were the young head coach, the young GM and John Lynch. You were out there. We looked awesome. We gave you the hope. Okay, well, after a while, you lost an arm, right? This is the Empire Strikes Back. This is Prague saying, okay, I have to have this almost tightening, this cloud come over the organization, to have my hands in things financially, to get back to a Return of the Jedi moment, if you will, if you're a Star Wars nerd like myself. But I think this thing is going to take longer, going to be harder. I think you're going to have drama the entire offseason simply because, again, they're focused on winning. They want to win games, but also they want to win contracts. They don't want to be the Saints. They don't want to be teams in cap hell for years. They don't want to be a team dishing out just cash in general on players not worth it. They view Purdy as a really good player, as the franchise quarterback, although I think had they not lost on Ayuk, had they not lost on Debo or Hargrave, or in their eyes, Nick Bosa and others, this wouldn't be happening, right? They would not feel the pressure of not paying Brock Purdy $55 million. They would just do it, right? But because you lose so much, it almost course corrects more drastically than I think we want to admit, and it's going to lead into a Brock Purdy long contract negotiation. That said, my overall takeaways from the article is I really think people are blowing this out of proportion. Yes, there is serious topics to discuss. Yes, you can get into, like Kyle's hot seat. You can get into John's hot seat. You can get into Parag taking things over. But I do think that a lot of people are making this more dramatic than it actually is. I think when you view things as just from an outside lens of looking out, from a business mindset, this is not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Everybody is equating this to, it's Jed York and Jim Harbaugh all over again. This is the beginning of the end for Kyle and John. No, it's not. No, it's not. Could it be? Sure. But it's not. Because you know what? We talked 2 months ago. The minute they pay Brock Purdy, that was already going to be the beginning of the end. Right? That was already going to be okay. You're tying yourself to him. As soon as that happens, whether Parag or Jed step in or not with the spending, that was already going to be the beginning of the clock ticking down to either an extension for John and Kyle or the inevitable end of their tenure in San Francisco. It just so happens that these things are coinciding at the same time that I think fans are starting to get maybe a little restless, a little more overdramatic. This is not Jed versus Harbaugh. This is not York, coming in and wiping the slate. This is This is not going to lead to a Chip Kelly and Jim Tomsula era in San Francisco. The only way that happens is if Kyle and John sign Brock to a new deal, whatever it may be, and he sucks, and he stinks, and they lose games. But guess what? Had this organizational shift never happened, never been talked about, that would have been the course of history anyways. That's why I don't think this is that big of a deal. Do I think it is York and Parag tightening the reins? Yeah, I do. They're reining things back in. The roster's getting that fat cut off of it. They're going to cut some bigger contracts, maybe be a little more ruthless in negotiations, but this, again, is not them saying we're not going to spend. It's saying we are going to selectively spend this offseason on our own guys and on free agents. But this is not the beginning of the end. This is not a, oh my God, panic button sets in. This is simply as a business, we are spending too much money. Our top-end earners are not giving us the same production as they once were or ever were. We have to let them go. Because we can find guys making, let's say, instead of $20 million per year, making $8 million per year that are half the price, or instead of being 32, they're 26, and they can give us the exact same production. Hence Javon Hargrave. Hence maybe Dre Greenlaw. Hence Deebo Samuel. Like, some of these guys have just worn out their time in San Francisco. It's time to get younger, time to get cheaper. I don't think this is real. Like, the words used, ruthless, analytical, like, those are scary words, and we're all like, oh God, what's going to happen? But I don't think this is as drastic as many people are making it sound. It's just a kind of wringing things back into formation, right? It's like when you spill some milk when you're a little kid. Oh God, it's going everywhere. Well, they're going to put that back in the cup. They're going to make sure the spending, the milk, if you will, the juice, if you will, is only going in the cup, which means it's only going into the roster and only going to be productive for this team. That's the difference. They're not going to spend and spill the juice all over the kitchen. You're like, oh my God, it's everywhere. It's a mess. They're going to clean up the mess, organize everything again, and hopefully get back to who they were as of 2 years ago. But spend smarter along the way. I want to let you guys know, though, if you want to see this team play this year, or you want to go to a baseball game or an NBA game, use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERS, ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. With that said, I want to get to the YouTube chat because there are so many comments in here that I want to get to almost all of them because there's so much. Because look, Bobo, Niner Goat 16, Rob D, John Nevels, I want to get to all your comments, Kawachipto. So put your questions there, put your comments there, and we'll start off things with Bobo off the rip here saying, I'm fine with Kyle Shanahan moving on because he's a choker in my book. Blowing double-digit leads late in the Super Bowl, he was the play caller in. He continues saying, thanks to Kyle the Choke Shanahan, KC is now a dynasty. Let's address the okay moving off of Kyle Shanahan. I get it. A lot of people feel this way. A lot of people are tired of Kyle. I think if you want to be honest with yourself, hearing Jed and Parag having this organizational reset, there being, if you want to use power struggle, albeit rather drastic, this is a good thing for you. If you have been waiting for the hammer to come down on Kyle, if you will, this is a good thing for you. This is essentially them starting the clock, which it would have happened with Purdy anyways in his new contract, but this is them, okay, tick, 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 tick. Either it booms or the clock gets reset again if they win more. But the seat's not hot according to Mike Silver. Jed York still believes in Kyle as he should. Kyle Shanahan, despite all his faults in big games, is still one of the most successful and best head coaches in football. Yes, time management. Yes, blown leads late. All those things are evident and relevant to this conversation. I just don't know what you do. Like, I don't want to get into the, well, if you fire Kyle, what do you do afterwards? It's just, now is not the time to fire Kyle. I think that's the worst possible move you can make. I think in 2 or 3 years, we can certainly have that conversation, but all that stems back to if Purdy fails or not. Niners Goat 16 says, the BA deal was absolute trash. I do wonder, had Brandon Ayuk not gotten hurt and rounded somewhat back into form late last year, if we view it as the same way, like, yes, in retrospect, now paying $30 million to a receiver that only played about half your year and has a really serious knee injury, that now you're paying big money to, doesn't look good. I think had Ayuk been healthy and maybe still held out, I think you're looking at a trajectory along the lines of a Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel-like deal where the first year is not great, but in year 2 and 3 and 4 maybe, it looks a lot better. Like, I think if Ayuk didn't get hurt, we wouldn't view it as bad as it is. However, knowing the receiver market this year, it kind of makes you wish they would have waited and just say, here's your 5th-year option, play on it, because Ayuk in this year's market probably gets like $28 million per year, which I'm sure is what they would have signed last year had all things gone their way instead of Ayuk's way late in negotiations. Rob D says, Albert Breer said Dre Greenlaw is projected to get 3 years, $25.5 million. That's $8.5 per year. Too rich for SF. Yeah, I don't think the money is the problem there. I think it's the years for them. From my understanding, they are really open to a 1-year prove-it deal, getting back with Saleh for 1 year. Hopefully, Greenlaw plays great. I think they understand that inevitably, whether it's this offseason or next offseason, they are going to lose Dre Greenlaw. I just think if you get him back when he's healthy, in an awkward way, you can rebuild his comp pick compensation for them, if you will. Because I don't mind paying Dre Greenlaw $8.5 million. Now you add an incentive to get it more towards $12 million per year, but it's the 3 years that bothers me the most. I do not want to pay a Dre Greenlaw for 3 years knowing that he may be damaged goods, if you will. Now, I hope that's not true, but 3 years is my sticking point compared to the $8.5 million per year he may get this offseason. Niners Goat 16 also says, we kept extending players on a team proven not to be good enough to win a Super Bowl. This year is too late. Yes, but no, because those players you were extending, I think maybe outside of Deebo, but even then you can justify Deebo's contract, right? You had to bring back Fred, probably the best linebacker in football. You had to bring back Kittle, one of the best blockers and tight end receivers in football. Of course, you had to re-sign Nick Bosa, Defensive Player of the Year. I think a lot of this is defensive tackle and linebacker and offensive lineman Trent Williams. Those are premium positions. Whereas receiver, you can kind of find a replacement for a receiver every single draft cycle. Well, yes, you want to have the dominant one usually. You don't need to have like 2 or 3 high-paid players. And I think that's the problem. Like, I get it, you pay for Hargrave, but it didn't work out. But, like, you don't mind paying for a defensive tackle that isn't good for you. I think hence why you can almost justify the Kinlaw drafting and the Hargrave deal because it's defensive tackle. The league values that. However, extending Deebo and Ayuk, I think, was a bad deal. I think they should have traded Deebo last year. It would have made more sense at the time. Or traded Ayuk last year and drafted whoever they got with the draft pick compensation they would have had in return. I think it's just, again, you don't need to have 2 highly paid receivers. The Dolphins did that. It's not working. The Niners did that. It's not working. So I think it's just positional value. They overvalued Deebo and Ayuk, I think, with the offense they had. They overvalued Hargrave and Kinlaw with this draft pick. I think they overvalued a little bit of Christian McCaffrey. They kind of paid him for a do-good, and then he's getting older and didn't work out very well last year, although it may change this year if he's back healthy. I just think a lot of it's positional value and how you spend. You can pay the interior offensive line and your front 7 on defense, but you don't need to have 2 highly paid corners and a highly paid safety and 2 big-name, highly paid receivers in a highly paid running back, in a highly paid left tackle, in a highly paid quarterback, in a highly paid fullback, in tight end. That's not sustainable, right? You have to have the insulation, the depth, and if you can, let's say instead of paying 2 big name receivers, pay 1 big name receiver and have 2 or 3 or 4 good receivers behind that one guy, it's much more valuable than having, 2 big name receivers, that one of those being hurt a lot in Deebo Samuel. Rob D also says here, they are delineating the lines of responsibility, which is good. Yes. Thumbs up. Completely agree. This is them reorganizing the front office, which I think is a big thing for them. Things got too awry during their all-in process. They're kind of reining things back in, saying this is your lane, this is where you're going to be, this is where you're going to be, which is what every business does when they cut the spending, if you'll cut the funding on certain things. So they're just recompartmentalizing how they do things inside the HQ. Let's see. Bobo says here that all problems and conflicts start small, then it gets out of hand. This is the start. It could be, and I think a lot of that stems from not winning Super Bowls, but also I believe that this is the start. Your comment would have been the beginning no matter what, because they're going to pay Brock Purdy. Like, again, paying Brock Purdy is more of the bigger indication that, okay, if this doesn't work, this is your 3rd shot at a franchise quarterback. If that doesn't work, it's over no matter what. So this is more so of like, how can we avoid Brock Purdy's deal being the one factor in maybe an ending of an era in San Francisco? And also, I think they realize that if we don't cut spending on older, overvalued players, we're not going to be able to field the best roster around Brock Purdy, who I think they like a lot, but also see that, hey, when you ain't got your best guys out there, although you played good, you have had a decline in production against certain teams, and I think that they view that as, okay, we have to still be able to add and give Brock his best opportunities, hence why cutting spending this year allows you next offseason, or be more selective on their spending next offseason to get better players in the building to hopefully maximize Purdy's window, rather than saying, well, it's all Brock's fault and putting all the pressure on him this offseason. Keep going down here. John Nevels asks, are we really going to get Joey Bosa, or Bosa 2.0 times 2? Yes, John, it's happening. It's happening. I've been on that for months. I know, things transpire slowly in the NFL. You have playoffs and you have the free agency and the offseason stuff, but they want to play together. They want Joey. I don't think it's going to be expensive. I don't think it's like, oh my goodness, it's $14 million per year for Joey Bosa. I don't think so. Now, it's going to happen though. I think Joey has suitors. I'm sure the Bengals, the Lions, the Falcons. I just think there is a gravitational pull to him to come to San Francisco. His brother, his mom wants him here. The Niners want him here. I would be just astonished if Joey Bosa is not donning red and gold in 2025. Let's see. Bobo says, I want number 6, meaning the 6th Super Bowl, so F them picks, go get the 6th. See, you say that, and I get it. We all want the 6th. I think 2 years ago, we're playing Kansas City. We're like, this is it. It's a full circle in time. It's poetry, same opponent, different year, new quarterback. This is how you make things right. But you can't say F them picks and then in the same mindset say, well, fire Kyle. Because that would indicate you believe in Kyle enough to say F those picks, he'll maximize the roster. And I don't think you're there, Bobo, which maybe you are. Maybe I'm wrong. But you cannot say F those picks and then in the same offseason say, reining things in, fire Kyle Shanahan, tighten the restraints. I think this is them trying to elongate Kyle's tenure because they do believe in him enough. What else do we have here? Tommy Huxley says, good morning, fairies. I will say this, as Niners Throwback says here, you woke up late. Yeah, I also woke up very late today. Usually I am a 7:30 riser. I didn't get up till 9 a.m. and I was like, what's going on? What's going on? So daylight savings got me. seemingly got Tommy, may have got 49ers throwback here as well. But look, the Niners are in a transitional season. The Niners are in a time of not, like, even the word reset, I think it's more of a, like reset means you're almost like rebooting in a way, right? This is like, they're almost making like a sequel. Like, it's not a reboot of a movie or a franchise or a television series. It's more of a recalibration. They're almost recasting an important part, right? They're making a recasting, if you will. If you want to use the TV and movie kind of comparison, they're just recasting parts. They're taking away certain people. They're going to add in more. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's a really good thing for the organization. I'm all for it. Again, I don't think it's as drastic as we're making it out to be. I think it's needed. I think it's smart, and I think it's going to pay dividends down the road. But time will tell. They're going to pay Brock Purdy, but I think that'll take a little bit longer to get done than the early indications were telling us. Whether it was Schefter or Rossini, now you're hearing franchise tags, and it can take forever to get done. It's not going to be easy or simple, penny pinching, if you will. But this is a great thing. This is a great thing. Be on board with this. If you don't like Kyle Shanahan, you're going to love this. I think if you want to be competitive for years to come, and I think if you don't believe in Brock Purdy, it's also good. Because they say, look, we do want to pay Brock, but we also want to maximize the roster around him. And to do that, we have to cut some fat off the roster to make that possible. But don't forget to follow us on social media. At 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. Use that promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com. Also, if you want to perform like the GOAT, I'm hoping if you want to perform like Parag Marathe and Jed York and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch this offseason as they try to rework and recalibrate and recast this roster, I'm hoping they have a can of GOAT fuel on their desk because it'll help you do so much. It's a coffee alternative. I think it's the best tasting energy drink on the market. And if you want to get yourself a can of GOAT fuel, go ahead and click that link down below in the description and get yourself 10% off. It also helps the show in the meantime, as well as the SeatGeek promo code as well. Get you a discount on tickets and GOAT fuel down below in the description. I want to thank Niners Throwback, a Niners fan, Bobo, Kawachipto, Tommy Huxley, John Nevels, Niners GOAT 16, Rob D. Don't forget, tonight is my free agency predictions. You're not going to want to forget that. So come back to this same channel. We're going to preview and predict the entire free agency. Who does San Francisco add? Who do they let walk out the door? Where do some key free agents sign? So come back to this channel later on tonight. But as always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that review. I hope to see you later. And my name is Sterling Bennett, and stay faithful.